Welcome to Bird Talks. Bird Talks are podcast series of the Czech Society for Ornithology, and I'm Petr Voříšek. And my special guest today is Sergi Herrando. Hi, Sergi.
Hi, Petr.
Sergi is an ornithologist, obviously. He works for Catalan Ornithological Institute based in Barcelona. He is a researcher at the research institute called CREAF. But probably most importantly for us at this moment, and the reason why Sergi is visiting Prague, is that he's a chair of the European Bird Census Council, which is the non-governmental organization organizing bird monitoring and atlasing work in Europe. And Sergi is expert on bird atlases. Sergi, could you explain us very shortly what are the atlases? Because atlas can be the atlas of the pictures of the birds, for example. But we are talking about the specific types of the atlases. What kind of atlases?
Yeah. Thank you, Petr. Yes, atlases in that context mean putting where birds are in a map. So we are talking about cartography, about mapping. So yes, it's as simple as difficult as identifying in a map where the species are.
And usually and mostly we probably talk about breeding bird atlases, but these are not the atlases of birds' nests.
No, exactly. But there are some connection with the nest. So they are showing where birds are breeding, and all breeding species need a nest. In case of birds, as you know, so yeah, there is some connection, but in the end, we are not putting a very specific symbology on where the nest is, and in that sense, is a secure method not to explain to the general people publicly where the nests are, which is a bit sensitive in some cases, just because of the resolution, essentially, and that's one of the most important things of an atlas. So the resolution of the information, to which degree it is precise or not, and we don't need such kind of precision when doing an atlas.
Okay, so let's stay with the breeding bird atlases for a while. You said such atlases show where the birds are breeding. How we know the birds are breeding, or are there some probabilities the birds could be breeding, or are we sure the birds are breeding? How this is done, and in the large spatial scale?
Yeah, it's not so easy. So it took some time for ornithologists to identify which type of observations of bird species were connected to breeding evidence to some degree. So some of the behavior of a bird corresponds to a potentially breeding behavior. Some others are not.
Like carrying food,
for instance,
somewhere.
So birds usually are not carrying food unless they have their chicks nearby. So this is one of the examples. Yeah, there could be others. Singing is a less is also a potential evidence of breeding when it's repeated in the same place, for instance. This could indicate with not higher probability, but with some probability that the nest is nearby.
And who is collecting this information?
Ornithologists, field ornithologists.
Okay.
Field ornithologists, so people that goes to the field, usually coordinated by organizations such as CSO,
ornithological
societies, and yeah, with a very particular approach, which means that since the territory should be usually very extensive and the human capacity is limited, there is a strong need of coordination. You will be there, and the other person will be in a different place, doing more or less the same work. Try to find where birds are breeding.
And the aim is to cover large area, like
usually it depends a lot on the specific aim of each atlas. Usually are country atlases or regional atlases. In some cases are continental atlases. So it depends on the aim. But in the end, the coordinators should somehow distribute the capacities, so manpower, in the end, across the territory.
But do we have enough ornithologists? Are there professionals? The ornithologist is the researcher. So how many people we need for such atlas?
This is a very good question, because usually you cannot pay for such amount of man effort. It's not possible. So I would say that I don't know any atlas anywhere made by professionals, or at least only by professionals. So you need citizen science. You need people who spend part of the free time to go and follow some methodologies and go to a given place according to some rules given by the coordinator. So yeah, we need volunteers in the end. It's impossible without them. The amount of work cannot be done without this approach.
That's probably the benefit of ornithology. So many people love birds. So there is a relatively good number of volunteer field workers. But you were involved also in organizing the mammal atlas. Am I right?
You are right.
What's the difference?
There are quite a lot of differences in the mammal atlas. We are working with the mammal atlas in Catalonia. I'm trying to help there with let's say the experience from the bird atlases. And yeah, probably one of the main differences is that there are no breeding codes. So mammals are moving and there are no nests. And especially that there are very different types of mammals approached with very different methodologies. And for birds, it's more or less the same for all species. While for mammals, the approaches should differ depending of...
Could you give us example?
Yeah. For instance, for small mammals, which are very difficult to find in many cases, you should try to either to capture them or either to capture parts of them. For instance, with some traps, collecting some of the species of hair, or camera traps for larger mammals, audio monitoring for bats. So it depends on the type of mammal. The approach is different, and so it makes it a bit more complex.
Are the volunteers also involved in mammal atlas?
Yes, it's the same approach, because if not, this is simply impossible.
Do they buy the equipment? Because for audio monitoring, you need equipment. Do they buy the equipment, or do you give them?
Well, depend on the case. For instance, for camera traps, they use their own cameras, as we use our own binoculars. But for instance, for audio monitoring, they should have an equipment that is given by the organization, by the coordinator. So, and they have to try to share among them. But yeah, so it's a bit more complex technically, with a bit more tools, let's say, equipment. But yeah, in the end, probably they will manage. But it's the first atlas in Catalonia, while we have 3 for birds. So let's see what happens with the mammals.
And I suppose you can use your experience from organizing bird atlases.
I hope so.
You hope so? Okay. Okay, so let's go back to the bird atlases. Just for completeness, let's say that there are also bird atlases, distribution atlases covering non-breeding periods. But let's focus on the breeding atlases, because they are probably the most commonly produced atlases. You were one of the main authors of the European Breeding Bird Atlas, specifically the second one, because we have 2 European Breeding Bird Atlases. Could you just tell us very briefly when and where this European Breeding Bird Atlas was done, and what we achieved by this?
Yeah, well, it was, so the project was started as a project without data yet in 2010, and it was like a decision by the association that we are, the EBCC. So everybody at the country level was very enthusiastic and tried to put national efforts together somehow in a given period and try to build something together. And finally, it was decided that the field period should be between 2013 and 2017. This was the period for collecting information in the field. And then we need 3 more years until the publication of the atlas. So the whole project took 10 years in total, with 5 years of fieldwork essentially. And the area, this is also important. It's not trivial. So Europe was defined. Let's say
there are several definitions of Europe.
Yeah, it was not easy, but essentially it was defined by others in the past. But still, there are some details to be arranged. For instance, if the islands in the Atlantic were included or not, where was the limit in Turkey? If all of Turkey should be included, which it was the case finally. Where was the limit, especially in the Ural Mountains? This is not easy because if I remember well the detail, the administrative limits of the regions in Russia are not coincident with the geographical limits. So it was not easy, and many details. But in the end, the area was huge. It's more than 11 million square kilometers. So this is
how easy or difficult was to collect the data from this huge territory, around 50 countries, if I'm right?
Yeah.
Speaking different languages, having different cultures, probably in ornithology also using more or less different field methods. How this was put together?
Well, it was not easy. I think there was 2 main aspects here. On one side was the communication, to see which were the possibilities and the traditions and everything in the logistic perspective at the country level. And on the other side, there was a kind of technical work using all this information to try to find a common standard. And it was not easy because there is a huge difference in Europe in terms of capacity and experience between some Western countries and some other areas in the East. So the gradient was so strong that was a bit difficult to try to find a balance between these.
I expect there are more ornithologists in the West.
Yeah, many more. Many more people. Yeah, it's also related to the how many people lives in the different areas. So it's not only. The
number of ornithologists.
It's not only the number of people living and ornithologists, but it's the accessibility of the areas. So there are areas that are very isolated and difficult to cover.
And you did some field work in eastern parts or southeastern parts of Europe for the atlas?
Me personally,
yeah.
I went to Greece. Greece is not an easy country. It may look easy in terms that there are quite. It's visited a lot by many people.
They probably go to the sea.
But it's difficult because there are many islands, many islands, and so there are many squares. When I mean squares, maybe we haven't defined what's a square.
Maybe it's good moment to explain the squares.
A square is so we have to put birds in a map. But as I said before, not to the detail of showing exactly where the bird or the nest is found. So, and we have to distribute the effort among the available people, let's say.
To tell the people where they should
go. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So we have to find the proper way of distributing this effort to show the same effort, the same information, or comparable information across the whole area. So we usually tend to do that using squares, what we call squares. So if we are doing an atlas in a small, let's say city, for instance, we will probably end using small squares. If it's for the whole of Europe, we decided that the square should be 50 by 50 kilometers each. So
they are projected to the map. Everybody
they are
knows.
projected to the map somehow. It's like putting a grid in the map, and then there is a particular area, particular territory that belongs to a given square, and all the information should refer to those
the square.
To those squares, yeah.
Okay. So how many squares did we have in European Atlas?
I think it's 5,111, if I remember well.
The squares 50 by 50.
50 by 50 squares.
That's really huge area. Okay, so finally, the Atlas is there. It was published as a book. It's also online, at least partly. The maps are online. But these are still somehow to say the data. Of course, aggregated in the way that's information where each bird species is occurring and breeding in Europe. But this is the source of the information for further research. Am I right?
Yeah.
And is there any use already of this output of the second European Atlas?
Yeah. Actually, when we were already collecting the data and putting everything in a map, we started in the same atlas to produce some results, which could be very interesting, such as comparing the distribution we were collecting with the distribution of the first atlas, because this is the second, as you said. So the first atlas was made 30 years before, and what was the first surprise is the level of change in the distribution between the two atlases. So if I remember well, some numbers, we were more or less able to compare the two distributions for 400 species. For 180 species, we found positive changes, so increases in distribution.
Increases in the distribution.
For a similar number, maybe a bit less, we found decreases in the distribution. So for many species, there were changes in distribution. And
then the third type of the change could be that the species is moving, the total area is the same, but it's moving somewhere.
Yes, and this is very interesting. When addressing this point, we did something already in the atlas when we compare not the total number of squares, how they have changed, but which is the position of these squares. And it's true that, for instance, we did some analysis at the biogeographical belt, if you wish, so the different areas with similar climate, and we found that the highest increases in the number of species were found up there in the north, in the Arctic area.
Can we interpret it that the species are moving to the north?
Yes, I think so, because it was also found in the Alpine mountains. So also there was an increase in the number of species in the Alpine area. So and there was a third interesting point, that there was a decrease. The only clear decrease was found in the south, in the Mediterranean. So obviously it seems to be something related to climate. It's not the only driving force, but probably in this past 30 years, between the two atlases, climate made a change affecting birds somehow.
And I assume that researchers, after the atlas was published, jumped on the data.
Yeah.
And other external independent researchers just try to use
and then
the data.
The results were even more interesting because they analyzed many details with very good statistic procedures. So they found, on one side, one very surprising issue, that is that the models they were made in the past, they were not always given the same results that were observed with the change data I was referring to.
So the models were modeling the future changes in the distribution,
exactly.
And these were not consistent with the real changes we've observed.
So in some cases, there was maybe at the beginning of the century, there was a prediction that there will be many species changing towards the north, and then we find that some species from the north were moving to the south as well. So not always the change was exactly in this, let's say, climate modeling approach. And yeah,
why is it? Were the models wrong, or the data?
No, it was not the models were wrong as such. It was that the species were also changing because of other aspects and not only because of climate. I said that there was a trace of impact of climate, but not only. There are other aspects. And one of them could be also protection in a positive manner. So there are many species that have been increasingly protected in Europe in the last decades. So they have been able to recover from previous areas. So
and they can spread.
And this spread is not following a northern southern process in gradient. It's a different issue.
Even probably their past distribution was not limited by climate, but by persecution or
Yeah. So that there are other processes.
Mm-hmm. The atlas and bird monitoring data in general are widely used by the European Union and other institutions for policy and for nature conservation. And this is what Liina Ila Mononen, the director of the European Environment Agency, says about the importance of the monitoring data.
How important are the data about the birds, the bird censuses, the bird atlases created by many volunteers, by many field workers all around Europe for your work and for the predictions of the European Environment Agency, and maybe even for some laws such as the Nature Restoration Law or even the Green Deal? How important is the role of this data in the preparation of these products?
It is essential and critical. And we are now just receiving the reports from the member states and member countries on these data that are under the nature directives, to be recorded only 7 years. And yes, birds are a good indicator, not only, what is happening for the one species, but also what is happening in the environment, how the climate change is actually moving. How the species are moving towards more northern destinations, and at the same time, what kind of pressures they're having. So yes, this data and also the input that the citizens, I know the bird watchers, the ornithologists are putting into getting this data, getting these atlases, it is very, very important. So I want to congratulate and thank all of those who are putting their effort on this data gathering.
Okay. So this is the European Atlas, the spatial scale, 50 by 50 kilometers. It's quite coarse to study some detail. If I imagine the landscape in Czechia, I think in Catalonia as well, at 50 by 50 kilometers, you find so diverse landscape and so many habitats. So in Catalonia, you've produced 3 atlases.
Mm-hmm.
Did you discover, I expect that you did it at a much finer scale. And did you discover differences or the things you was not able to discover at the European scale because that was so big?
Yes. It often happens when you go to a smaller area. Then you can again split the capacities of fieldwork in a different manner with more precise information. So the grid has, in this case, is 10 by 10 grid. It's not 50 by 50. So there are many more squares for the same amount of area, so that it's more precise, and this helps a lot researchers to try to find where the change have been produced and which could be the causes of this change. When doing it at 50 by 50, it should be analyzed at the continental level. No, there is no much sense to do it at the national level or at the subnational level. To work at this scale, you need more atlases. You need atlases at the proper resolution to interpret things at this scale. Yeah.
And did you find, for example, did you find the effect of the climate change at the level of the Catalonian atlas? Because the landscape is diverse. We have the sea coast and the Pyrenees.
Very good question, because I said that we find some climate effect at the European scale. For instance, this increase in the north and this decrease in the south. When we did exactly the same in Catalonia, we didn't find that climate effect.
Not at all?
Well, almost not at all, I would say. And it's a very particular case, I think, because it's been an increasing in temperatures. This is clear in the south as well. But at the same time, there has been, during this, let's say, 40 years between the two, the first and the third atlas, there has been an incredible increase in the forest area. So there has been a lot of increases of forest species, which in the past were thought to be from the north, and now we are finding in very dry areas that now are forest, dry forest, but forest anyway.
And that afforestation was supported by human activities, I guess.
And especially by rural abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important.
Natural succession.
Natural succession. So it's not planting trees and things like that. It's like
spontaneously the vegetation.
Spontaneously. It was so important that in the end, species that were thought to be in the north are now in the south. So it's like, apparently it's like a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. It's like that climate is happening, climate change is happening at the same time that other things are happening. And in the case of Catalonia, the spread of forest has been evident in this period.
Yeah. So far, we've been talking about the scientific use of the atlasing, of the mapping, the distribution of birds, but equally the atlas data is important for the policy. I'm not aware of any use by policy of the European Atlas, the new one. Correct me if I'm wrong. Probably it's too early, maybe. What about the Catalan Atlas? Is it used for landscape planning, nature conservation in Catalonia?
Yes. I think in general, atlases have been more widely used at the national atlases have been more widely used than the European atlases for policy, especially because policy usually is implemented at a relatively local scale, at the national level or a subnational or local level. So in the case of Catalonia, we, apart from the general 10 by 10 kilometer grid, we also work at 1 by 1, not covering all 1 by 1 because it's impossible, but covering a sample of 1 by 1 squares, and we produce what we call modeled maps at 1 by 1. And these modeled maps have been used widely in planning. For instance, in conservation planning, when defining,
what can I imagine?
For instance, you can imagine that there was I remember a specific case which is very interesting. There were some steppe birds still remaining in Catalonia, and there was the commission at the beginning of the century complained that there was an insufficient conservation of these species.
The European Commission was.
The European Commission, yeah. Thank you. And then this atlas information was used to draw which should be the protected areas, to at least to try to cover the core areas of these species for the conservation. This was a very good example of the use of the atlas for conservation.
Mm-hmm.
It was not this the only let's say criteria, but was an important one.
Oh, good. I can imagine that the atlases can be used for planning the wind farms. That's a big issue, getting renewable energy, and wind farms can be harming the nature. So it's probably essential information for planning wind farms and other kind of stuff like this. Okay, so let's go bit down at the spatial scale, because also you were involved in the Atlas of Birds of Barcelona city.
Yes.
And I guess you get even more precise information in Barcelona city, because how big is Barcelona?
Oh, it's more or less the same size of Prague, I think, more or less. It's quite similar in terms of... And
the population is...
Population is... For the city, is the metropolitan area, but it's strictly for the city. So the municipality, it's 1,800,000 100,000 people, more or less.
It's a little bit bigger, but maybe the area is more or less similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's.
So in this case, we went for the 1 by 1 square.
1 by 1.
1 by 1 for all. We covered all 1 by 1 squares. So all the information on where the birds were breeding were located at 1 by 1. So quite precise.
And usually the urban environment is very specific. We have bird species colonizing the cities. Sometimes they are disappearing from the cities. What are the species, if you have discovered such a species colonizing the Barcelona city?
So it changes rapidly. So my colleagues remind me a few days ago that the number of species from the Atlas, which was published in 2017, has already changed. So it's quite, as you said, it's quite mobile. It's changing a lot. Now it seems that there are more species. For instance, the rook. It's a typical species from in cities in the Czech Republic, I think. I am right?
It is, yes.
While it was completely absent historically, but now recently there is a pair trying to nest.
Just one pair?
Just one pair.
And
but who knows?
Is it in the city center?
In the city center, in the middle of the city center, yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, just one pair. Nobody knows exactly how the species has reached the city. Apparently, it is colonizing the south of France. But yeah, that seems to be the case. There are other more interesting cases coming from the harbor. So by boat.
No, who came by boat?
I think that it was the crow, the carrion crow, the gray one. So the one you have here, I think.
Yes.
Czech Republic, not the black one.
Well, we have both.
You have both. Yes. So the ways species colonize the city are very interesting to study.
Yeah, you have exotic species in Barcelona, the parakeets.
Yeah, there are two very common species of parakeets: the monk parakeet and the red-ringed parakeet. The monk is extraordinarily abundant. Actually, the municipality tries to control the populations because it's noisy and creates some problems in the let's say infrastructure.
What kind of problems?
The problems is that the nests are so big. They build this kind of communal nest.
The big,
built of small branches. But in the end, it could be incredibly big, so that it may fall all the overall structure in which the nests are located, and it could create some problems. Yeah.
So do they create it on the electricity pylons,
for instance?
Okay.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah. And the municipality tries to remove this nest, but the birds are constantly learning. So at the beginning they were only nesting on the palm trees, but they were removed from the palm trees, and the birds just quickly learn that they will move to the pine trees and then to the electricity pylons, and they are faster than us.
Yeah, so this is probably the very good example. The birds who are clever enough to adapt to the urban environment. Do you have from the Atlas or from other sources information about the overall trend of the species breeding in Barcelona? Is it stable, increasing? What's the dynamic?
Yeah, this is not our Atlas information because we have just one Atlas in Barcelona, but we have a monitoring system as well. Similar to the monitoring system that is present probably in many urban areas as well in many countries. So we use the information from 20 years of monitoring in Barcelona, and in general the situation is worsening. So for most of the species, despite the efforts of the municipality to make the city greener, the species are decreasing. Not all of them.
The species are decreasing in the abundance, in the numbers.
Yes.
And the number of species?
Well, the number of species in Barcelona, breeding is about 90 species, but we don't have information for many of them. So just for maybe around 30 or 40, we have such kind of information, quantitative information, how they change. obviously, for some others, there are good projects of reintroductions, such as falcons and some others. And for instance, one interesting case is the Audouin's gull. Maybe you know that the species is typical from the Mediterranean.
The Mediterranean species.
And it tends to, usually it bred in very isolated rocky areas, then it started to breed in the Ebro Delta. And now there are 1,000 pairs breeding in Barcelona harbor. There, so in the middle
concrete,
together with
concrete
surface and thousands of ships and every day. So a very humanized place.
Yeah, I'm asking about the number of species because in Prague, unfortunately, we don't have the information about the trends in numbers, not in the consistent way, but we have very good information about the number of species for the historical period. And 80 years ago, there was much less species in Prague than today. So number of species breeding and occurring in other parts of the year in Prague is increasing, in fact.
I think it could be something similar in Barcelona because, as I told you, even in a period of just 10 years, it seems that there are more breeding species. But at least for the common ones, their numbers are decreasing, excepting obviously these new exotic species that are all increasing, and maybe they have some influence on the native species, some negative influence. It's not clear, but it could be. It's very common to see how the parrots take the food and leave the sparrows without food on the street. It's very common.
But it's probably not the reason for sparrows to decline.
Not, but maybe it contributes a little bit.
Yeah. And is there any species in Barcelona who is doing better in the city than in the countryside? Because many species are occurring in the city and in the rural areas as well. Because sometimes the reason for my question is that in some cases the city may be providing better conditions for the species than the area outside of the city, and sometimes they may be benefiting from that.
Yeah, maybe one of these species is the wood pigeon. The wood pigeon arrived in Barcelona relatively recently, maybe 3 decades ago or so.
It's similar to Prague.
And it started to grow and grow and grow, and it's still growing. The population is growing and growing, and being less and less attached to big green areas. Yeah, it's increasing a lot.
So this is probably the species.
And it's not increasing to such degree in the more natural areas.
In the countryside. Interesting. Yeah. I think we could speak a lot about all types of the atlases, but our time is limited. What is in your eyes the future of the atlases? Because there is a huge development in technology. Ornithologists can share the data almost in real time, their observation data, and there are not only the ornithologists, we have the audio recordings and camera traps and everything could be with some simplifications immediately online shared. Is there still any role for further atlases in the future?
It's difficult always to predict the future. And it's difficult to predict the future of the atlases, of course. My impression is that in the current situation, there is still a good place for doing a new atlas. And many countries are thinking right now in doing the third or the fourth atlas. And I perfectly understand, because when we are analyzing such amount of data collected for instance, in online portals that we are producing, we can see always some gaps because of the preference of observers to go to a given
observers go to nice places to see nice birds,
or to see a specific species, and the effort is not the same everywhere. So I think that there will be still place for a kind of more harmonized approach to the birds that we have in a given territory. Yeah.
And perhaps in between could be accompanied by this
Yeah,
online
exactly. In between, I think there is also room for using such amount of information to produce something in between. Maybe not for a species, maybe it needs a lot of treatment of the data, because when you have a lot of data, you have also potentially
a lot
of problems. So yeah, that's something that is important, and we are at the EBCC, and also in some countries we tend to call them like live atlases. So a way of tracking the distribution on a more regular basis, probably with some gaps that could be only solved when doing a kind of proper atlas work. But we will see in the future. We will see.
Yeah, let's see. Okay. I think that's all for today's Birds Talks. Thank you, Sergi. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to everybody listening or watching us. And we will appreciate if you let us know how did you like it or not. And if you have any comments, we'll be really happy to get the comments, and see you next time.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you for inviting me.